Well, welcome everyone. I'm just going to lay some ground rules for this evening. I'm Catherine Morrison and I'm the Adult Services Manager and Assistant Director at the Scarborough Library. Before the beginning of each program at the library, we like to begin with a playing of our land acknowledgement, which was recorded by Alan T. Paul, a member of the Maliseet Nation and a member of the Library Board of Trustees.
The Scarborough Public Library acknowledges that it is located in the traditional homeland, past and present, of tribes in the Wabanaki Confederacy. We recognize and honor the current tribes who comprise the Confederacy: the Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Maliseets, and the Micmac, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge the Owaskoag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough. We respect the traditional values of these tribes and support their efforts for land and water protection and restoration. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences.
Thank you. This is the 9th year that the library has partnered with the Camden Conference to bring supplemental local programming to Southern Maine, leading up to the conference, which this year will be held February 17th through the 19th. We are thankful to the organization for the fiscal support it provides that allows us to purchase library materials related to the conference's theme. Viola Sheehan, a volunteer with the Camden Conference's Southern Maine Outreach Committee, is here to tell us about this year's conference and how you can participate. Viola?
Good evening, everyone. I'm V. Sheehan, and on behalf of the Camden Conference, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's program by Consul General for Canada in Boston, Rodger Cuzner, on the extraordinary bilateral trade relationship between Canada and the United States across the world's longest undefended border. I'd like to thank Scarborough Library and collaborating libraries in York, Kennebunk, Cumberland, and Bath for making tonight's event possible. Lenore Rapkin, Camden Conference volunteer, Scarborough resident, dual citizen of Canada and the United States, was the spark that started the idea to put together tonight's program so that we can understand our dynamic neighbor to the north better. Our other community events, tonight's program is designed to lead up to the 2023 Camden Conference weekend, February 17th to 19th, on global trade and politics, managing turbulence. For information on our panel of national and international experts, visit camdenconference.org/conference2023, where you can also register to attend in person at our production site in Camden or at live streaming venues in Portland, at USM, or in Rockland or Belfast. Or else you can attend virtually in your own home. The Camden Conference is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, volunteer-driven citizens forum whose mission is to foster informed discourse on world issues through year-round events and student education, culminating in our annual February weekend conference. I hope we'll see a lot of you there, and thank you very much for coming. So back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, V. I also want to add that Lenore Rapkin is a very valuable long-term member of the library trustees of Scarborough Public Library. So thank you, Lenore. We are very honored to welcome Rodger Cuzner, Consul General of Canada in Boston, to speak with us this evening. Mr. Cuzner, or Rodger as he prefers to be addressed, grew up in Glace Bay on Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. He graduated from St. Francis Xavier University and then worked planning special events for the Cape Breton Recreation Department. He served as a member of the Canadian Parliament in the House of Commons from 2000 to 2019, serving Brador and Casno, Cape Breton. While an MP, he was involved in oceans and fishing policy and later labor relations and workforce development. He worked to strengthen the tourism industry and infrastructure vitally important to his constituents in Cape Breton. Upon leaving Parliament, he worked in the private sector before being appointed Consul General in October 2020 by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And we're very pleased that he's joining us this evening. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and to V as well. And I should thank Lenore, I guess, too, for the suggestion to have such an evening and to extend the invitation. So thanks very much. And it's always a pleasure to come and speak, as V had said, about the extraordinary relationship between our two countries. It's one that is the envy of the world, and I'm not overstating that. It's a fact, and we can get into so many of the reasons why. It's a relationship I think sometimes we take for granted, and I'm a Cuzner is Flemish, but I'm a MacDonald and a Leonard on the other side. And so very much like most of Cape Breton, there's a Scottish connection and Scottish roots. And the story of Martha and Rory, when Martha said to Rory, very deep in their relationship, and they had gotten on in years, and Martha said, "Rory, you never tell me that you love me anymore." And Rory said, "Well, you'll remember our wedding night, Martha." And she said, "Yes, I remember the wedding night, Rory." She says, and remember that night I told you that I loved you very much." And she said, "You did indeed, Rory, you did indeed." He said, "Well, if anything changes, I'll tell you, you'll be the first to know." So it's similar to the relationship that our two countries have, in that there's so much that we do take for granted. And I think John F. Kennedy, many have said much about the relationship, but John F. Kennedy spoke to the House of Commons in 1961, and he sort of framed up the relationship between our two countries. He said, "Geography makes us neighbors, history makes us friends, economics makes us partners, and necessity makes us allies." And I think that sort of speaks volumes. I know, being from Cape Breton and down here in the Boston area, it's you run into people all the time that have got deep roots, and they come from Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. I was stopped by the police. One quick story, and then I'll move on to the topic at hand. But I got stopped by the police in Watertown back. This is before I was Consul General. I was down. My son was playing some hockey down this way, and I was in Watertown. Got stopped by the police. I was a member of Parliament at the time. The young officer asked me for my license and registration and insurance. I said, "Well, it's in the trunk. It's in my wallet in the trunk." He said, "Well, is it a state license?" I said, "No, I'm from Canada." He said, "What part of Canada?" I said, "Nova Scotia." "What part of Nova Scotia?" I said, "Cape Breton." He said, "What part of Cape Breton?" I said, I'm from Glace Bay." He said, "My dad was born in Shedicamp." I said, that's fabulous." I said, "I'm a member of Parliament, and Shedicamp is part of my district. It's part of my constituency." He said, my Uncle Bruno owns Mr. Chicken. I said, I know, I know Bruno. So we had a protracted discussion with the lights flashing the entire time. And I'm sure the neighbors thought they had stopped a major crime figure, El Chapo or something. But just to speak of the deep roots that and the deep connection that Atlantic Canada and really Quebec as well, and all of Canada has in the United States, and in particular northeastern U.S. If I could, I want to share a few comments, and it'd be nice to be in person so that I can see your eyes glaze over as I share some statistics with you. But if in fact there are some questions that you can that are of interest to you, that in these situations sometimes the folks online know more about a particular issue than I would myself. Know that we offer up our office to share further details past this, and I'll encourage you, if you do have questions, to put them in the chat. Catherine has been so kind to. She said she'd gather them up and put them to me. So we'll look forward to that. But just a couple of things, like a brief reflection on where we've been with trade in particular. And I want to reach back to 1987, really the precursor of NAFTA, the precursor of USMCA. And that was the US-Canada Free Trade Agreement. And that was a deal that was cut between Ronald Reagan, the president of the day, a Republican, and our conservative prime minister at the time, Brian Mulroney. And those two leaders did some really neat things. They did some incredibly positive, undertook a number of initiatives. Anybody that follows the environment file would remember back then it was Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney that struck the agreement on acid rain. And we were in a terrible situation in Canada. The industry along the border, so much of it was having an impact on our lakes and killing our lakes and streams in Canada. And I really, in retrospect, I really admire the courage of Ronald Reagan, who at the time had to take on some industry leaders to say, no, we're going to fix this, and this is an issue that we're going to address. And they reached the agreement with the acid rain agreement, and it's had an incredible positive impact on the environment, on the atmosphere, on the lakes and streams in Canada and US. And so that was positive. But as well, they struck the free trade agreement in '87, and it was a positive thing again between the two countries. And they realized, those two leaders realized, and then first President Bush, as well as it sort of bled into his leadership, they saw that this would be of benefit to the entirety of North America. And so in 1993, they extended that free trade agreement to bring in Mexico as well. And so for, in doing that, they created a marketplace that included 500 million consumers. And so that the three countries could bring their goods, their services to 500 million consumers. I know that sort of sounds like a lot. In the big scheme of things globally, it's about 6.5% of the global population. But still, with 6.5% of the global population, it produces probably in the neighborhood of about 28% of the global GDP. So it is, up to 2018, 25 years that agreement was served all three countries well, created millions of jobs in all three countries. We saw that it's about a $27 trillion market that has evolved from the NAFTA free trade agreement. It was funny, back in the day of the first free trade agreement, there was incredible opposition on the part of many industrialists, but also I guess it was the fear of the unknown. Trade unions were adamantly opposed to any kind of an agreement, and but nonetheless, it's been one that has brought all three countries a great deal of benefit. Spring ahead 25 years to 2018, and the president of the day, Donald Trump, said that it was the worst deal ever signed, worst agreement ever put forward. I think, I'm not sure what it was he was looking at the time, but I know just some of the basics, some of the fundamental statistics and data that you can survey at the time. Prior to free trade, the unemployment rate in the United States was at 6.5%, and the number of unemployed, which is different than the unemployment rate, was about 8.5%. 25 years later, you turn the clock ahead, and the unemployment rate's about 3.8%, and the real the number of people unemployed is about 6.5. So I would think that there would be great benefit in that agreement 25 years prior. But nonetheless, he wanted to open the agreement again and reevaluate and renegotiate the agreement. I was in Parliament at the time, and I recall the members of the opposition, our Prime Minister Trudeau. Some thought that the President Trump had a bit of a reputation as a negotiator, so they felt that Canada may be taken to the woodshed. And that, in fact, didn't happen. Number one, the Prime Minister embraced the opportunity to renegotiate NAFTA. The deal had been negotiated 25 years prior, before the internet. I'm sure there were faxing, offers back and forth during that period of time, because the internet hadn't been up and being used. There were, the world had changed over that 25 years, and so an opportunity to renegotiate made sense. So we entered into it. Robert Lighthizer was lead negotiator for the U.S., and we had our current Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland, at the time, led the negotiations for Canada, and it was tough. It was really it was a tough negotiation. I think both negotiators had a tremendous amount of respect for each other. The senior bureaucrats on both sides respected each other, and there was, like any other. I'm sort of saying it as a bilateral, but one thing that I can say is that both U.S. and Canadian negotiators believe that if they wanted to level the playing field with, especially with Mexico, rather than just access to cheaper labor, if they could raise health, safety standards and wages, that would be of benefit to the Mexican workers. Environmental issues were a big part of the negotiation, and that was to the benefit of the people in Mexico. And so those were some of the common threads that ran through the negotiation. So they were protracted. They were drawn out. But at the end of the day, I think one thing that the former president can look back on is that he got a deal done, and it received bipartisan support. Both sides of the aisle supported the deal, and in Canada, we supported it with the exception of the NDP, but both Liberals and Conservatives and Bloc saw the merit in it and saw it was a good deal for Canadian workers and Canadian business. So we went forward with it, and it's in place. Unfortunately, I think we're still sort of finding out the impacts of the deal. There's not a great deal that changed, but there were some aspects of it that changed. With the onset of the global pandemic, where the borders were closed for pretty much 2 years, I think we're just sort of coming to terms with some aspects of the deal now. So, through the negotiation, we felt that the rising tide lifts all ships, and I think that one of the people in Mexico and workers in Mexico did benefit from the negotiations. So currently, I mentioned before, $27 trillion is the market that's been created by the USMCA. For those that like to get down a little bit more granular, that's about $145 million worth of trade every hour that happens between our three countries. And we are so interconnected. It's such a interconnected economy, and what we do. And they talk about the auto sector, and as tourists, you can apply the tourism analogy when you go to a country and you buy a T-shirt and stay a bit, and then go somewhere else or come home. Well, if take the auto sector, if an auto part was an industrial tourist, that part may be built in Mexico and may come to Canada and be added to or put into another part, another component, go to the United States. By the time, if they bought a T-shirt, if that part bought a T-shirt every time they crossed the border, by the time that car landed on the showroom floor, it would have 8 bad T-shirts, just because that's how much connectivity that we have between the three countries. The auto sector in the US is really a North American auto sector versus an Asian market versus European market. We very much rely on each other in the fluidity and the interconnectivity of the three. And I think one thing that's become more and more obvious, especially in today's geopolitical, the reality of today's geopolitical times, is it's going to become, we're going to become more reliant on our friends, on our neighbors, on our allies, on our trusted partners, on our Marthas and Rorys. 85% of the critical minerals right now are being supplied by China. And there are other places in the world where we can access it. We've been sort of lulled into this sense of security that, that's all well and fine. But I think, if anything, the last number of years have taught us is that, we have to be able to rely on those that we know are trustworthy and that we know share similar values, share similar principles and goals and ambitions. And so I think that will do nothing but strengthen the ties between our two countries, with regard to security, with regard to trade. It will only amplify the great relationship that we have had, and where we have to continue with that relationship. The U.S. with the current trade agreement that we have in place, the U.S. does have a position of benefit by about 15%. They have a 15% surplus in trade with Canada. But you know, it was interesting. I was a member of Parliament when the negotiations were going on, and it was interesting to watch, because again, you know, the what's at risk is taking the relationship for granted, and sometimes you just have to stand up and say, "Listen, folks, this is here's the reality here," and I during that period of time, I remember Chrystia Freeland reminding her American counterparts, almost 40 states within the United States, their number one trade partner, their destination for goods manufactured is Canada. We're the top trading partner. You know, we know that in Maine, $1.6 billion a year Maine sends to Canada. You know, and Maine is a great destination for us as well. And it's agriculture, it's the fishery, it's energy, it's so many sectors. Tourism, we're probably our own best supporters when it comes to tourism. I remember being a kid, which wasn't yesterday, but I remember my folks packing up the camper trailer and coming down through New Brunswick, through St. Andrews, New Brunswick, and down. And we used to go to a place in Skowhegan, Maine, Yonder Hill Campground. And they had a pool and a diving board and an arcade. We coming out of Cape Breton, we thought we landed in Disneyland when we landed in Skowhegan, Maine. Didn't even mind the mosquitoes. But and then later on, you know, when we hit university age, the destination for every university student in Nova Scotia is Old Orchard Beach, without question. And you know, we continue to come down on vacation in Maine, and I know you know, a lot of Mainers spend their summers. They like the cool summers in Atlantic Canada as well. So there's you know, overall there's the tourism sector. Canadians spend $17 billion a year in the U.S. A lot of that goes to Florida, but a lot of it comes to the New England states as well. So we're tightly connected, and I think we share very similar values, and I think, you know, it's served us well in the past, and hopefully it will continue to serve us well. So there are just some comments off the top, and what I might do, Catherine, if you might have some questions, we might be able to open it up, and if I could respond specifically to some of the issues, or if you have anything that I might be able to shed a little bit more light on. And as I said, if I don't have the answer, then I certainly offer up the strength of the office to come back later with some response.
Well, I've got a few questions here, and people can start chatting any questions they have. I also know we have some people, I believe, from some organizations that may be involved with trade in Canada. So if you would like to share any work, any anything what your organization is doing, if you'd like to share that, please put that in the chat and maybe we can put you on camera and you can share the good work your organizations are doing. So back to tourism, do you think now that the border's open, things will get back to the levels they were at before? Or have Canadians found a new place to go?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think New England has always been a great destination, great skiing and in the wintertime. And, through Maine, we feel safe coming here. We feel, I've been to, I remember the first time I went to Mexico for a vacation. And it was a great time. And, you go in February, obviously the sun is great, but there's a whole lot of, do's and don'ts when you go to a completely foreign country. Don't eat the fish inland and don't eat the meat on the coast, sort of thing. Otherwise, you might end up pretty uncomfortable for a couple of days. And there's places that you don't go, and you have to be pretty careful. But we feel pretty welcome in northeastern U.S. It's it's so similar, and whether it's the cuisine, the culture, the music is a little bit similar, and people are pretty laid back. They pretty respectful and just want to have raise their families and have a good time. So I think we'll always feel welcome here, and I hope those from Maine and New England feel the same when they come to Canada. Certainly the price of gas, a lot of air traffic is rubber tired, and I think that with the price of gas down again, that's of benefit. But we've got a couple of big golf courses in Cape Breton Island. We've got Cabot Links and Cabot Cliffs, and about 50% of the clientele are U.S. golfers. It's a higher end tourist. About 25% are from Ontario, but the numbers spiked up again this past summer. They were really pleased with the numbers that they had this year. So I think there was that pent up desire to get out and spread your wings and see some people, and people were pretty much shack wacky and wanting to do something. And just the proximity is such that it's amazing how many calls I get. For some reason, they think that maybe a consul general might have Bruins tickets, and I get an inordinate number of calls that I have to say, sorry, folks, but no luck here. But there's still a lot of people love to come to the Boston area as well.
Well, a couple of things related maybe to Maine, the fishing industry and lobstering. And I know both in Canada and the United States, the lobstering has been labeled as unsustainable by certain environmental organizations. And also, at least in the United States, I'm not sure about in Canada, the United States has been trying to enact stiffer regulations on fishing equipment, which they keep putting off. Is it a similar situation in Canada? And are the two countries working together to resolve that problem?
A great question, an important question for both Atlantic Canada and for the east coast of, for all of Maine. It's, in some communities, it's a existential question. Know that, I think the way the fishery has evolved over the last number of years has been in the right direction and positive. I'm married to a fish broker's daughter who, for H. Hopkins Limited out of Cape Breton, they sold lobster to John Nagel and Sons in Boston for 65 years. And I had an opportunity to go over and meet with the sons when I first arrived here 2 years ago. It's been a big part of our trade. Obviously, there are concerns. It's a completely different fishery. Where I come from in Cape Breton, we have usually the seasons run 10 weeks. On the west side of the island, it starts 1st of May and shuts down early in July. On the east coast over Glace Bay, Lewisburg, those fishing communities, it starts the middle of May and runs to the middle of July. We have significant limits on the number of traps we have. Each fisher is only allowed 275 traps, and typically what they do is the upright rope, the rope that's buoyed, is attached to 5 traps. So they try to limit the number of ropes in the water. We never really had any problem because a lot of the problem goes back to the right whales. We never really had a problem with right whales in Canada until 2017. And, that is without question a result of the waters warming along the East Coast of North America. And as the waters warm, the whales follow the food, and so they're moving up the coast. And in 2017, we had a record number of vessel strikes on right whales, and that caused us great concern. We, as Canadians, one thing we do not want is to lose access to that vast American market. So we will do all in our power to make sure that we have best practices in place that we reduce that. So we did have that spike in 2017, and I don't think we've had a vessel hit one of the right whales since then. There have been entanglements. What we are doing now through DFO, the management plan that we've put in place, is we have a very high level of surveillance with manned flights and drone surveillance as well over the Gulf. And anytime that we identify a whale, it's marked. Any fishers in that particular area have to vacate the area. They have to pull their gear out of that. They have 1 day to pull their gear out, and it has to stay out for 15 days. If there is a sighting, on day 8, the clock starts over again. And so we're trying to prevent the strikes. We've made it mandatory to reduce speeds. So we have a number of measures that are in place. What I see, it's a different fishery completely off the coast of Maine. Again, it's still, it's part of, what Maine is as a state, and it's just part of who you are as a Mainer. The measures that have been taken, I know that they've taken great strides. The Maine Lobster Fishermen's Association they've taken great strides in dealing with ghost gear. That's been a focus as well in Canada. Gear that may have, come loose over time, through storms, been abandoned, whatever it is. Efforts to clean up that ghost gear that result in entanglements have been very much focused in the last number of years, which I think is of benefit. But you asked the question, is there cooperation? I don't think there is. We are still at the point where we continue to point fingers as to the ropes now are marked and identified, codified and colored. And it's still sort of a process of, well, it's their gear, or it's, the US gear, it's not ours. And it's this finger pointing, as opposed to what we're missing is that table where people can sit around and say, okay, the problem is with the population, with the right whales. What are the best practices? What is it we can do that can guarantee the survival of the species and hopefully grow that population? I know we go up to Portland week after next. The Lobster Institute hosts a significant conference annually, and I'm looking forward to getting up, and there'll be representatives from both sides of the border, and to have that discussion. But there's some really neat things going on at the University of Maine, Orono, with the Lobster Institute, and I think we address this. If it's tough because it becomes political as well, becomes emotional as well. But if we can deal with the science, deal with the data, deal with the those things around the issue, then I think we can get to a better place. But it's in everybody's best interest to develop best practices and to adhere to the best practices.
Anyone have any questions, please write them in the chat, or you can turn on your microphone and let us know. We have a question here. Here's the question. Are there cooperative programs in US and Canada for resettlement of migrant populations of refugees and asylum seekers? You may know in Maine, we have a lot of settling a lot of asylum seekers here in the Portland area.
I don't know if there's a cooperative program. That's a good question. I know that we do have programs in Canada. We've increased the number of, we know that, we need people, and I think we're a welcoming nation, and I don't know if we've done as well as we can in the past, but I know that there's certainly a focus now. We've increased considerably, almost doubled the number of new Canadians that we take in annually. It's an ambitious program, but I think it's one that when you see the turmoil that's going on in the world, I think both nations, share our history has been to take those that find themselves in danger and find themselves in peril, and I think we're benevolent as two nations, but as far as any kind of a cooperative program, I don't think our people. It's pretty neat. The border that we have, it's one of the longest undefended borders. It is the longest undefended border in the world, and the relationship between those that are responsible on both sides, I think, is still positive. During the pandemic, it was shut down for 2 years, and that was just a control factor that trying to get a handle on the whole transfer of the disease and the virus, and I think that was necessary. And both governments worked well together. I have to commend the men and women that continue to keep the goods flowing and the borders open. And there was a few hiccups there with some toilet paper, but other than that, not too many people were hard done by with regard. There were some hiccups in the supply chain, but for the most part, our border remained still pretty productive, and so as it reopened, it was a little frustrating. And I know that the governors in the northern states and the lawmakers in the northern states were frustrated in that it was the rubber tire traffic. You could fly into Florida and that was okay, but you couldn't drive across the border in Vermont or New Hampshire or Maine. And so that was a really frustrating aspect of it. But that's been dealt with, and we're in good shape now. Anybody that's crossed the border of late would know that it's pretty much back to pre-pandemic. The situation there is pretty much back to pre-pandemic.
Thanks for that question, Anne. My next question is on the New England Clean Energy Connect, the electric transmission. You probably know that we voted a while back, and the vote was to not allow it, but it is still up in the air. It's going to be in court, I believe in April. It's going to trial. So since we've labeled this the Canadian perspective on US and Canadian trade, I'll give you an opportunity to share what the Canadian perspective is on the transmission lines from Hydro-Quebec to Massachusetts.
Thanks for that, Catherine. And I think I did hear something about that.
Yeah.
No, from a government of Canada perspective, it's a domestic issue. I can say from my vantage point, I came into this position in the midst of that whole debate. What I know is that the province of Quebec and Hydro-Quebec have got a product that is the envy of the world. They are rich in that. They're rich in hydropower, and it's something that if it was anywhere else would we supply so much energy to New York through many of the northern states, and I know I've had an opportunity to speak with Charlie Baker, while he was governor here, and there was a great deal of frustration. We see it. The government of Canada sees it as a domestic issue, and that's the reality. But from an outsider's perspective, I'll give you the Rodger Cuzner version, not the Consul General version. It's clean, it's sustainable, it's affordable, it's at your back door. I know that there's a great ambition in all of northeastern U.S. to become, to move towards zero emissions. And so to have access to that type of resource is incredible. The investment that's being made in offshore wind and in solar is tremendous. And this conference, I'm down in Rhode Island now, and a lot of the focus on this Ocean Tech conference that I'm at is around offshore wind and the opportunities around offshore wind. But the wind doesn't always blow, and the sun doesn't always shine. And from the Rodger Cuzner perspective, what northeastern U.S. would have access to in Quebec is that battery that's up north. And when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, you had access to that power. And when the wind blows and the sun shines, you reverse that and you send that power back up the grid. So you have that benefit. So from my view, I thought it was an opportunity for my to come down through Maine. I thought that it would bring benefit to some of those communities, access to high-speed broadband, which opens up limitless opportunities. That would be an added benefit. But just to utilize that. Now Hydro-Quebec, there's a big play on now with the Atlantic Loop and trying to loop all the Atlantic provinces to help them get off fossil fuels. So if that's what they look at next, I don't know. I don't know if the opportunity is gone. Again, that's a Hydro-Quebec thing. And with it before the courts, I'd never want to weigh in on that. I never want to weigh on that either, but I just see it as a huge resource that would be of benefit to so many people in this corner of the U.S. That, but listen, it's the choice. I thought it was sort of strange the way from a political perspective, I thought the wording on the question was a little strange. We used to have this problem. Well, it's probably not a used to have this problem, but with the province of Quebec and their place in Canada. And so they've had a couple of initiatives in the past where they wanted to separate. And so one thing that was made clear, sometimes the wording would be somewhat suspect. And, when you were asked the question, if your answer was no, it meant yes. And if your answer was yes, it meant no. And so the government, Jean Chrétien was the prime minister, and he brought in Stéphane Dion, and they passed the Clarity Act that if there was going to be a question posed to the people of Quebec, that it be clear and decisive, and that people knew what they were voting for or against, and so that there'd be nothing cute about it. So I just found that there wasn't a great deal of clarity in the question that was posed. I don't know if that would have had an impact on the outcome, but again, from our perspective, it was a domestic issue.
Okay, thank you. We do have a couple of questions here. One is, what would you say is the most vital product for the United States that trades with the Canadian provinces? Or sorry, what would you say is the most vital product for the US that Canada provides?
I guess that depends on where you are in the country. Certainly, if you're in New York, it's probably energy. Maybe on the East Coast, it's it might be potatoes, seafood, or lumber. I'm not. I don't know, but services are back and forth. They're rendered back and forth. We have. When I look at some of the financial services now, Toronto Dominion has come into the U.S. and really, carved out a significant footprint in the U.S. I know that it goes both ways. We're the benefactor. LL Bean is a main company, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
LL, yeah. So they've carved out a big placement in Canada now. They've really expanded into in Canada. I know that with regard to potatoes, if anybody had been to McDonald's today and the French fries that they ate, they might be Maine potatoes, but they would have been along the line touched by McCain, who are a Canadian firm that operate out of Lawrenceville, New Brunswick, and they employ upwards of 15,000 U.S. workers. But I don't know if there's a best. We still supply some pretty good hockey players. I know Brad Marchand is with the Boston Bruins, but I mean the way. I'm a Leafs fan, so we've got a guy from Arizona, Austin Matthews, is our big stud. So U.S. is sort of given back in that regard as well. So so I don't know if there's anyone, depending on where you are. We continue to export some talent as well. Shania Twain and Celine Dion and Justin Bieber. Sorry about that one, but Jim Carrey. I mean, you wouldn't have The Pet Detective or The Mask, if it wasn't for Hamilton's Jim Carrey. So, we continue to. Lorne Michaels continues to rock it. with Saturday Night Live, good Canadian guy that's been, he's made his mark in New York. But we see ourselves in Canada, we continue to see ourselves as a player. You know, we don't have a big play in space, but we do the Canada arm, and we provide some some of the best and the brightest for the astronaut program. So we sort of play in that area. And a lot of the times, any goods that we manufacture, we're an intermediate manufacturer, and a lot of the times, something will be created, it'll come to Canada, it'll be added to, and then it will come back to the United States as a finished product to finish as a product. That's quite common too. So I don't know if there's any one product, but en masse, it's a relationship that's incredibly beneficial to both, and for Canadian workers and American workers, it's one that's served us both well over the years.
My grandmother was from Bath, New Brunswick, so we have passed by the McCain plant many times.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let's see. What do you know what the current status on the lobster trade is for both countries with China at this time? Is one country doing better than the other?
For years, our lobster fishermen, both in Maine and in Atlantic Canada, we harvest almost twice as much lobster as the fishers in Maine. I think Maine harvest is about 50 million metric ton a year, and we're 92 or 95 metric ton a year. But we identified both Maine and Canada identified the Asian market as one that was significant. For years we sold lobster like it was, like they were hamburger prices, where it really is a filet mignon. It's a treat. And they recognize that in a lot of the Asian markets. And so that's put pressure on it. Some of the things that we've done, we used to sell canners. We used to catch canners or shack lobster. And we stepped back from that probably about 10 or 15 years ago and increased the carpet size year over year. And it was tough. The fishermen thought that it was going to cost them in the long run, but the stock is in good shape. The biomass is healthy, and now that we just have markets and we put markets on the market lobsters on the market, we get top dollar for them, and I think that that's very similar to Maine. So it's not so much the harvest; it's the price point at the cash register, and I think that has been of benefit to everybody. Last year, we got up to $10 a pound there for sure. I know that's $10 Canadian, which is $7.50, $8 US, but still, every lobster fisherman in Nova Scotia had a pretty good year last year. And like I say, the stock, the biomass is in real good shape going forward.
We have two more questions, so I think we'll if you don't mind staying and answering those two, and then we'll end with that. So this is from Hillman from the Maine International Trade Center, and he says, given the geopolitical situation in Ukraine combined with the impact of global warming, do you envision Maine and the border provinces working more closely together on renewable energy projects in an effort to reduce the carbon footprint and reliance on foreign energy resources? So you spoke a little bit about that with the
I've had the opportunity to meet Hillman, fine young guy, and does a good job for the organization there. I do, and again, if that would be one of the frustrations that I would have had with the corridor and not granting the corridor for Quebec Hydro. I think that would have been a great resource. And I think we have to look more globally as to, what opportunities are there and how can we support others that are wanting to pursue some of those opportunities. But I think there does have to be a closer collaboration. I think there, with technology development, with when we share best practices, we talked about the whales moving northward. If we continue to deny or turn a blind eye or think that we have time with climate change, hopefully people are catching on and realizing that we don't. We just had Fiona hit Atlantic Canada, and it was pretty devastating. And people think it was because of the trees that were blown over and the flooding that occurred. But during that one storm, the ocean temperatures rose 6 degrees, and that's Celsius, 6 degrees Celsius. So it's imperative that we do address the climate issue. And I think best practices, I really like what's going on at conferences like this, where the best and the brightest come together to find solutions. And I think it's only through that, if we try to sort of stay in our own backyard, if we try to keep that information in silos, I don't think we maximize the impact that's so necessary right now.
Okay, and our last question is from Lenore Rapkin. How serious is the dwindling value of the Canadian dollar to the future of US-Canada trade? And does the USMCA address such issues?
Some Canadian manufacturers don't mind the lower Canadian dollar. They do okay when they're able to export their product to the US and get paid in Ben Franklin's. They do okay on the exchange, but it's not so much the weaker Canadian dollar. A lot of it has to do with the strength of the American dollar, and a lot of the times that's what has the greatest impact. That's what drives the differential. USMCA wouldn't really have, that's beyond the scope of the USMCA. I'm really looking forward to it. This is outstanding, Catherine, that you organized tonight's discussion in the wake of the Three Amigos meeting down in, that was exceptional planning.
Coincidental.
But nonetheless, we have a full brief. I'm looking forward to it. We have a full briefing on Friday as to the takeaways from the leaders meetings that they held recently in Mexico, and so I'm very much looking forward to that. The impacts, but if anybody might be interested, I could probably get an executive summary of those discussions out to the group that are on the line now. We could do that.
Okay, well, I won't take all the credit because we had several people who came up with the idea of having you here, so I'll give them the credit for that. And we had a great discussion. I thank everyone who did ask a question, and thanks to Matt Wong from your office who helped organize this, and Nicole before that, and also
Yes.
Lucy, who formerly worked with the library. Thanks to her for putting this all together. And thank you so much for joining this evening. And I hope you have a great time when you are up in Maine next it's at the Lobster Institute. And maybe on your next trip to Old Orchard, you'll stop by Scarborough. We're right next door,
There you go.
just down the beach. Keep walking on the beach and you'll get there.
Catherine, if I could, we were in university. There were 6 of us went down to Old Orchard, and I had my car stolen in Old Orchard. That was my story. Really, I parked it in front of a fire hydrant. It got towed away, but I had to tell my father that it was stolen. So that was back in the university days. So much more. We'd never do that now.
Right.
Catherine, thank you so much for the opportunity
Thank you.
to be with you today, and continued success with this series.
Right. Thank you. Thanks again, everyone.